This is the Ring of Honor, a.k.a. Shane T, boy, the baddest champion you ever seen, boy.
This is Mr. Anderson.
This is good old JR Jim Ross, and you are listening.
You're listening to Knockouts and 3 Counts.
We got a new world champion!
That might be one of the craziest knockouts I've ever seen in my life.
Knockouts and 3 Counts is the podcast, baby! It's the real deal, baby!
Knockouts and 3 Counts starts now.
What up, no? It is another Tuesday. This is Knockouts and 3 Counts. I've survived slinging the fucking mail, and our guest tonight has survived another war inside that Bkfc ring. So, like I told you, you never know who you're going to see in the box on the other side from me. So tonight, we are joined by Bare Knuckle FC's own Mark the Shark Irwin. How you doing, brother, man?
I'm doing good, brother. Thank you for having me.
Hey, man, our pleasure.
Yeah.
You got any social medias and everything? Let everybody know where they can find you at.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on Shark Irwin Bkfc on Instagram. So you could add me on there. That's probably the best place to follow. I'm also on Facebook, but Facebook is, or Meta, or whatever you want to call it now. That's trash. I don't go on there much. So I would say Shark Irwin Bkfc on Instagram is the best place to follow and get a hold of me.
Gotcha.
That seems to be a very common theme with the whole Meta Facebook thing anymore. Everybody's got one, but nobody fucking uses the thing, right?
For sure.
See, it's funny, though, because that's why I never stop the Facebook Live, because we get more comments off Facebook than we do YouTube. So I figure, fuck it, I'll just stream them to both, because that way there's more people commenting on it. But, I mean, bro, that gives us about as good a start as any to talk about, your most recent fight. How are you feeling now that you've had a little bit of time to kind of unwind and I'm sure you've watched it and dissected it a bunch of different times. So how are you feeling about your performance? Did it go the way you wanted? Did he throw anything at you didn't expect? What are your thoughts now?
It went pretty much exactly how we expected it to. He was a professional combat sports veteran of about 30 plus fights between boxing, MMA, kickboxing, and bare knuckle. So there's a lot of tape on him. We were able to study him a little bit, and that definitely helped as far as what to anticipate. And so we felt like a good game plan to try and punch in between his punches. We felt like he was kind of wild and winging with his shots, and so we wanted to beat him down the pipe with straighter punches and tighter boxing. I felt like we did a good job of executing the game plan. I got hit by very little. I got hit on the back of the head by an overhand punch that I thought shouldn't have been legal. And then I have 6 stitches in my left eye that we just got taken out. And that was about it. I feel healthy. I feel good. I'm hoping to get back in there January or February for the next one. And so I'm already back in training and gearing up for the next go-round.
I know you had pointed out the straighter punches. That's actually one of the things that when me and Kyle first had the conversation, when he let me know that you were coming on the show, I immediately went back and watched the fight, and that was the first thing that stood out to me was your boxing prowess, I guess you could say, because you definitely were in there with the cleaner, straighter punches. You were definitely picking your spots better. Just all about it, you could see that you had kind of his mark, I guess you could say, on the night.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I come from a traditional boxing background. I was a 2-time state champion with USA Boxing out here in California. I won the men's 141-pound division in 2017, and I won the men's 152-pound division in 2018. I also have a couple professional boxing bouts to my credit and my resume. So whereas a lot of these guys come from a more mixed martial arts MMA background, I come from a more traditional Western style boxing background, and I tried to really emphasize that in my strategy for this past fight. And like I said, we were happy with the performance and the outcome. So,
and you could definitely see that on the performance. But I'm glad you actually brought that up, because that queued me up perfectly for one of the questions I had for you. As somebody with a undefeated boxing record, looking as well as you have in your professional boxing career, what made you want to still make the transition to Bkfc? That's the thing that made me so curious, is it didn't seem like you were struggling in boxing. Like normally when you do see boxers, because I've watched every Bkfc event they put on, Normally, when you see boxers make the transition, either they're incredibly young in their career, or they're on the skid of their boxing career, so they're hoping to make this a transition, which wasn't the case for you. So what made you want to make that transition?
Well, honestly, I initially got the idea because I was watching YouTube, and I started watching some bare knuckle fights on there. I probably watched about half a dozen bare knuckle FC fights on YouTube, and just kind of having fun. And after watching 4 or 5 of them, I was like, you know what? I can beat a lot of these guys. Like, I could outbox a lot of these dudes. And then the very next day, I see that they're having open tryouts in Tampa, Florida. So I read it as a sign from the universe, and I bought myself a plane ticket that day. 2 weeks later, I was flying 3,000 miles. I made it to the tryouts. Out of 50 guys, they said they were going to give out about 5 contracts. I got one of them. And yeah, so it all just kind of seemed like fate, I guess you could say. And here we are. And, you know, now I'm really realizing the opportunity that's available fighting in the Bare Knuckle Fighting Championships, you know, because you could box, you know, in traditional gloved boxing and have 20, 30 fights and never make it anywhere. You know, my last fights, I was fighting during the pandemic. I was fighting in Tijuana, in small shows and parking lots, making no money. And now I'm with the Bkfc fighting on pay-per-view, you know, doing interviews with you guys. I'm going to Miami next weekend for the big cruiserweight championship fight. So the opportunity was really a big part of the allure as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Kyle. I've been talking. So go ahead.
No, you're good, dude. Go ahead.
Well, I'm actually glad you brought that up because past guest of the show, friend of the show at this point, Josh Burns, he's brought that up as well about the opportunity that BKFC presents. It really is such an opportunity for a lot of these, not only younger fighters, but veteran fighters as well. Like people that maybe, like a perfect example, I guess, is maybe like a Taylor Starling, right? Like you could have looked at her MMA career, you could have looked at her boxing career and thought one thing, but you've looked at what she's been able to do since she's come over to BKFC, and she's garnered such a huge fan base because of it. And it's been over the case of what, 3 or 4 fights to this point. So
I think she's actually had 2 fights and 1 cancellation.
Yeah,
but I'm a big fan of the Killer B.
Yeah,
you know, yeah, absolutely.
She's a savage,
I'm one of her
bro.
biggest fans. She brings it every time. But yeah, so that's exactly it. The ability to
Killer
go
B,
from,
if you hear this, the door is wide open to come fuck with your boys from Knockouts and 3 Counts. You know, Chris Curtis, we just saw him do his thing on UFC 268. Who knows? Maybe you might need to stay tuned for that soon. So, yeah, man, I've been impressed. You know, it's funny. Not that the guys' fights aren't more entertaining, but dude, the ladies that they brought in there, get in there and scrap, dog. Like that was the thing for me when I saw, because like Corey said, you know, I've known Josh Burns now for probably, I've known Josh Burns for a long time, because that's kind of where the basis from our show comes. So you mentioned that you have a straight boxing background. So do I. I fought 4 times boxing before I ever did, you know, jiu-jitsu or any of that. Went down, ended up getting my purple belt, and then trained with some of the guys that I have. But it's interesting with you getting in here to BKFC because you're seeing so many guys come over from the UFC. You know, you've got Hector Lombard, you got Joe Riggs. You could Melvin Gillard, go down the whole list. Do you feel like how important would you say, for me, and I say this all the time with MMA, the jab is the most underutilized thing that you'll see in MMA. So in a sport like BKFC, where you're not going to be throwing maybe as many punches, because obviously you don't want to take the damage to your hands, how important is the jab for you with BKFC? And do you have to be a little bit more conscious even with your jab, with the chance of breaking your hand?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, you know, with traditional style boxing, you know, like they say, everything behind the jab is the most important punch. You know, a good right hand can take you around the block. Jab can take you around the world. And I think that still bears true for bare knuckle fighting. You know, in my fight, obviously, I utilized it a lot. Sean Wheelock, you know, alluded to it, everything behind the jab for Irwin. And I think it's actually probably a safer punch to throw, really, because if you're throwing power shots and you're hitting someone on the skull and hard parts of the head with your bare knuckles, that's going to be a lot more damaging to your hands than landing a jab, which is the only non-power punch of all the different punches available.
Sure.
So, you know, for me, like I definitely, coming from that boxing background, I look to utilize and set up a jab and have that be the foundation that I'm going to build the rest of my punches around. So I don't think it changes whether the gloves are on or off. If anything, and especially, you know, because we're seeing a lot of MMA fighters, a lot of guys come over from different mixed martial arts promotions where that punch is not as utilized, right? I think it makes it all the much more important to controlling the range and establishing power shots behind it.
Well, that's
Go ahead.
That's the big thing in my mind, at least, is like you said, being able to control that range, especially in BKFC. You're seeing a lot of these guys, in, you know, not to say anything bad about your opponent or anything, but yet again, was kind of winging punches and stuff like that. And you can see if you're able to really control the range a little bit. And in my eyes, what I've been able to see over the, I guess, progression of BKFC is it's mostly about accuracy. That is the biggest thing, is if you can just hit one or two solid, accurate shots, that's all it takes with no gloves. It really is.
100%. It's the gloves makes a huge difference on how much damage that people can absorb. You know what I mean? Even a blocked punch, if I'm hitting you, you know, bare knuckle in the soft tissue of your arms and your gut and things like that, it's going to tear you apart real quick. You can only take a few. So the ability to, especially you put one or two accurate shots on someone's chin and that's their night.
Yeah. And you had pointed out the body shots as well. You were doing a great job of mixing those up in the fight. Yet again, to lean towards your boxing experience. Definitely.
Yeah, thank you. I'm a big body puncher. I won the state championship in 2018 with body punches. You know, if I'm putting people out and knocking people down, and it's usually because of body punches, even if it's not directly, you know, the headshots are set up because I've been targeting the body. I definitely think it's a lost art in striking and pugilism to attack the midsection. And so it's
I agree
usually
100%.
a focal point of my attack and my offensive repertoire.
I agree 100% because I've said it multiple times for anybody who's been following the show, which for all of you guys that are joining the stream, you know, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button, like button, comment button. If you got any questions, throw them out. You know, we ain't scared this way. But yeah, man, I say that all the time because the worst punch I ever took in any of the boxing fights I had was a liver shot because a kid hit me and I'm like, shit, okay, well, that hurt. But I kept moving forward, and then I'm like, oh shit, it was the delayed reaction. And I'm like, I'm gonna have to take me a knee real quick because I can't breathe, you know. And that's the thing. I feel like in a sport like BKFC, the body shots, not only from out at range, but the fact that you're able to fight in the clinch, man. Like if you get a guy who really knows how to use that tie clinch and the tie clung and be able to use the body shot, I mean, that'll keep the guy there. He won't be able to go anywhere. I mean, it's a nasty thing. But you mentioned about, you know, some of your technique with boxing and your experience with that. In doing some of my research, you know, I saw that you trained a little bit with Jason Perillo too. Tell me a little bit about that. I mean, for all of our MMA fans, you know that he's working with the likes of Chito, Vera, who just fought, all kinds of other names. We can keep naming them off. Tell me a little bit about that. How does that help your game? And how did you and Jason link up?
Yeah, so, you know, like we kind of alluded to before, a lot of the athletes in BKFC come from more of a mixed martial arts background as opposed to a traditional boxing background. And so as a result, the way that they throw their punches and combinations a lot of times is a little bit different than traditional Western style boxing. So as a result, you know, my coaches and myself decided to surround myself with more MMA fighters as training partners and sparring partners for this camp, so that I'd be better suited and adapted to that style of striking. And being in Huntington Beach, Surf City, California, you know, I was able to use some of my connections through friends, training partners, and coaches to get in touch with some of the guys over at Ruka. And I was able to get set up with some good sparring with Chito Vera for, you know, this last camp of his and mine. So we did about 5 weeks worth of sparring. And then I was also able to get some rounds in with Cub Swanson and some of his guys over at UFC Gym Costa Mesa, which, you know, another great stable of fighters. So a lot of tough experienced world level MMA fighters that I had the opportunity to train with and against for this training camp. And I feel like that really helped prepare me for the speed and the pace of bare knuckle fighting.
So talking about Chito and getting to train with Chito, Vera, and stuff like that, what are your thoughts on his fight from this past week? I mean, we just saw he knocked Frankie Edgar out, and that's saying something because Frankie is, I mean, anyone who's watched MMA doesn't need me to tell you that he's one of the toughest guys in MMA. So to put him down like that to where he fell even after he got back up, I mean, that's a hell of a statement win for him to get. I mean, what are your thoughts on the fight, and who would you like to see him fight next?
Yeah, it was a great fight. You know what I mean? We were definitely watching it with earnest anticipation for sure. It was back and forth battle, which you expect from, two guys that are top 10 in the world and a future Hall of Famer in Frankie Edgar and a future world champion in Chito Vera. So great fight, great performance, great finish. As far as his next opponent, I'd love to see him get a crack at someone in the top 5. And then after that, a title shot. He's definitely deserving. And the sky's the limit for him after that performance. So really happy for him and all the guys over at Ruka. So shout out to Chito, Jason Perillo, and everybody else. Pat over at the world famous Ruka Training Center, the mastermind behind everything over there. Couldn't be more grateful for that experience and happier, for those guys.
I mean, there's not really much else to say. I mean, dude, he absolutely destroyed. I mean, I don't think anybody was expecting the front kick knockout. I mean, hell, nobody was expecting it when Silva did it either. With that being said, like you getting to train with Chito and all that stuff, I feel like since the fight with Sean O'Malley, we've seen a big change in him as far as just technically with his stand-up. He seems a lot more willing to get in there and throw and bang. And as you can see, I mean, even for it being a fight that was at 135, I mean, shit, he looked huge compared to Frankie Edgar. So with that being said, what do you think it is that really makes him dangerous for these guys? Because if that was any indication from what we can see from Chito, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing him knocking at the door of some of them higher rankings too.
Yeah, well, for one, I can tell you firsthand from training with him, Chito Vera is a physical specimen. The dude is as strong as an ox, and he's got conditioning for days. He's a real animal in there athletically. So, that, and then he's tenacious as they come. He's full steam ahead from the first bell to the last bell. And he's like that. In the octagon, he's like that in the training room. He's a real dog. And so, those hard rounds in camp definitely prepared me for my fight. And, with his work ethic and his mindset, there's no limit to his game and how far he can go in the sport.
Yeah.
Yo, shout out to Kathy. If you haven't already done so, get you a twisted tumbler, hot damn it. Get you a twisted tumbler. See that there? Get you one. With that being said, shout out to Kathy. You're definitely right. He's definitely upped his game in the last few fights. We're going to get a little bit more into UFC 268 in a little bit and get your thoughts on some of the other fights. But with that being said, I mean, that brings up a good question, dealing with that fight. Obviously, Frankie got dropped and wasn't able to get back up. During your fight, they called a knockdown that was clearly a shot to the back of the head. And even Lytle and all them were saying it after the shot took place. So with them calling that a knockdown, did that do anything to kind of change your mindset going into the next round? Did you know you had to kind of be a little bit more aggressive, or was that already kind of business as usual?
Well, you saw me arguing with the referee. I knew it wasn't a legal blow. So in addition to being a amateur boxing champion, a professional boxer, I'm also a USA Boxing licensed coach and official. So I've worked a lot of shows, refereeing and judging. So I know all the rules, front, back, left and right, top to bottom. And so immediately I started arguing my case, trying to not lose that extra point that I gained from scoring my knockdown against my opponent. But at the end of the day, the referee was arguing that I slipped into the shot, which I don't think was the case. So he said it was my fault. So essentially the knockdowns are a wash. So it's 10-9. But I pushed it out of my mind, and I went right back to work. I knew that he was fatiguing and tiring, and that I was going to be the more well-conditioned athlete. So I just right back to work, business as usual, and looking for that finish. So,
well, to go along with that, I wanted to ask, now that you got to toe, where in here you got to toe the line. It's not, it's not like boxing where you can go and coast. You can kind of use your bicycle, use your feet to get around the ring, feel the guy out as much. How does the toe the line aspect of bare knuckle change things for you as a fighter? Not only from a boxing standpoint, but just an overall fight. Because, I mean, let's face it, you guys are so close. If somebody is just quicker to the draw and throws that quick shot and connects before you can see it coming, the whole shit can be over in like 2 seconds. I mean, just ask, what's that guy's name? He had a
Yuli
4-second knockout.
Diaz.
Uli Diaz, the monster. Yeah. So towing the line definitely does force the action, right? Whereas, whether it's boxing, kickboxing, MMA, usually opponents start on opposite ends of the ring and then they'll come out to the middle to meet each other. You aren't afforded the luxury of taking that stroll out to the middle. You're right in the thick of it from the jump. So it definitely forces the action a lot more, which is fine. I'm an action fighter. You know what I mean? I always have been. I always will be. I'm not, I can use my feet and I can move, but I like to push the pace. So it's perfectly fine for me in my game and my skill set to go out there and meet someone on the scratch line. I'm about it.
I like it, dude. Like I said, it definitely makes it interesting for sure. For everybody jumping in the stream, if you got any questions for Mark the Shark Irwin, we're talking about Bare Knuckle FC, man. If you guys got anything you want to ask, throw them shits in the comments. Throw them in the comments because we ain't scared. I'll ask all of them. I mean, clearly you guys already know that because you've been hitting me up in the DMs about that. See, I ask and here we go. Mark the Shark is the real deal. We appreciate you. We appreciate you checking it out. Like I said, man. Go ahead, Corey.
I know I had a question, though.
Go ahead.
Regarding the strikes in the clinch, coming from the boxing background, what's your thoughts on that? Because I feel like that is a big difference in the game.
I like it. So me personally, I have more of a dirty boxing style. I started kind of late in boxing. I was a track and field athlete in college. I ran the 1 and the 2 mile, and I was looking for something to do afterwards, and I took to boxing pretty quickly and was competing within a year, but and then so on and so forth. But so I probably don't have the most traditional style like boxing technique. I like to fight in the clinch and I like to rough people up and use my physicality in there. So I feel like it actually, this style of fighting, bare knuckle fighting, and the rule set specifically for Bkfc, I think I found my sport. I think that my skills line up better in this than they do in traditional boxing because I get to get away with a little bit more of the holding and the hitting and the wrestling. And I think you see that in some of the exchanges in my last fight where we're locking up and we're trading punches, and multiple times he's the one that's pulling out and disengaging from that clinch because he doesn't like the body shots that I'm throwing underneath. And so I'm about that clinch fighting.
I mean, and the clinch adds such a different dynamic for you coming from a boxing background. Because in boxing, I mean, most of the time when you're seeing dudes clinch, they're kind of holding on, just trying to either tire the guy out, laying their weight on him, or, they're tired and they're trying to get their win back. In this, the fact that the referees are actually allowed to let you work, because that's one thing that I feel like in boxing, man, it's the guys that can be dirty like that in the clinch a lot of times. A guy that I think of is a guy that's from out here where we're from. James Toney was nasty in the clinch. Like, he'd sit there and shoulder roll your ass to death and just pop you. And you couldn't do anything to stop it because he just shoulder rolled whatever shots you threw. I agree 100%. I think the boxers are going to be the ones that really have the real advantage out here. And clearly, as you can see from the comments, I don't know if this is one of your students, but I mean, we're already getting good comments back on you being a coach and all that stuff. We appreciate you checking us out. If you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button because you never know who you're going to find. We just had James Lynch on with us. Like we said, if you're a Bare Knuckle FC fan, Josh Burns is one of the homies, and there's multiple interviews with him. Plus, like I said, UFC, Bellator, all that stuff, we got you covered. Alex coming in the comments. Did Justin Did Justin Thompson's passing give you thoughts on what age you plan to stop doing bare knuckle? Great fucking question.
Yeah, so that was just a couple events before mine. I think that was Bkfc 20 that happened. So obviously it was a lot of talk in the gym about that in the lead up to my fight. It's, you know, obviously a tragic, unfortunate event. You know, as a combat sports athlete, you know, we are all brothers and sisters in this game. You know, whether we're whether your sport is boxing, kickboxing, MMA, bare knuckle, you know, whether we have the same or different promotions, whatever it is, we're all in this fighting family. And so anytime that we lose one of our own, it's always tragic and sad, and it always makes us kind of more aware of the inherent danger that we put ourselves in every time that we climb through those ropes. Because, and I tell people that all the time, like, it could always be your last time that you climb through those ropes, you know, and you have to keep that at the forefront of your mind. But as far as how long, you know, I plan to fight, we'll see. You know, I have real aspirations of making a march towards a world title here in Bare Knuckle Fighting Championships. So right now, that's my goal. You know, obviously we're going to reset, reassess after every fight. But as of right now, the plan is world title or bust.
I mean, and go ahead, Corey. I'm just looking up the next stuff.
I like the plan. I can't argue with that. And to be honest with you, I feel like that was we had talked about it when the event took place and stuff on the show, and not to rehash it or anything, but I feel like it was really more so just a series of unfortunate events that led to that more than it was like anything BKFC did or anything like. I don't think it was just a series of unfortunate events, and like you had said, anybody who's been in the combat sphere for long enough has obviously heard of stuff like this. It may seem to take place a little bit less in like the MMA sphere, but when you talk about boxing and stuff, it might not have been last year, but the year before that, there was like a huge news gathering about how it was like one every month that somebody was passing away from boxing. So not to make light of it or anything like that, because it's always unfortunate when somebody passes, but it is, like you said, the inherent danger of signing up for it. So as long as I feel like what you were able to show in that fight too is as long as you do a good job of not being hit and playing defensive, especially in BKFC, where it does take, like we had noted, the 2 solid shots and you could very well be out for the night. So as long as you play the defensive game, I feel like you're a lot better. But for I believe it was John Thornton.
Justin Thornton.
It was a series of unfortunate events for sure. I know he had suffered a neck injury, so the fatalness of it wasn't necessarily in the cage. It's not like he died in the ring or anything like that. So it's just all around unfortunate. I know they tried to do their best, and it seems like they at least didn't shy away from it. They, you know, like Dave Feldman's came out and talked about it. They did separate segments and stuff before the events and before the pay-per-views following that and stuff. So they've done the best they could following a rather,
and I mean, let's not forget, dude, at the end of the day, we're talking about fighting. It's like the old saying, you can't play boxing, you can't play jiu-jitsu, you can't play MMA, you can't, dude. Even if we're just talking about straight up grappling, you don't play grappling, you don't play anything that's got to do with you dishing out physicality like that to somebody else. Because here's the thing, if you really want to go down the list, boxing obviously has got probably the most deaths when it comes to that, but boxing's also been around so much longer than everybody else. And at the end of the day, I mean, look, I feel so bad for his family, and that's such a sad thing to happen to anybody. So do not mistake what I'm saying. But at the same time, like you just said, like from the first time I ever stepped in a boxing ring, I was 13 years old. We've talked about this multiple times on the show. I'll never forget. Right before I went to go walk out to the ring, there was 2 6-year-olds that fought before me, and the kid's mom pulled him out of the ring in the middle of the fight. I told my mom, I remember that day, I was like, I don't care if I get knocked out. Stay away from the ring. But my point to saying that is like, you know what you're getting yourself into. if you get yourself to the point where you're ready to say, hey, I want to fight somebody, you've probably already been sparring, or you probably already been grappling, or whatever the given case is for whatever sport we're talking about. You know the risk that you take. And I'm not saying that it makes it okay that somebody died, but I also have to give credit to Bkfc where it's due, because they're, as far as I know, the first promotion I've ever heard of where they're offering guys pensions after so many fights and things like that. Now, obviously, that still doesn't change the fact that the man died. But I mean, Feldman came right out and said that they, tried to help his family out with everything. And if I'm not mistaken, I read a few different press out releases where his family was like, look, I'm not, we don't blame Bare Knuckle FC for, what happened. Again, at the end of the day, you know the risk you take when you step into that ring. Before
100%.
we get off, go ahead. My bad.
Yeah. I mean, I was just gonna say, just to kind of tag on that. Obviously, we always hope that everybody goes home safe and well to their families. I always, I wish that for myself, and I wish that for my opponent. When it's all said and done. But I always tell everybody too, when I go in there with a mindset, I am ready and willing to die in there to get the victory. You know what I mean? Like, and I know that that's a real risk and possibility. And, we all go in there with that mindset and that attitude. And if you don't, you're in the wrong business. So, we never want to see anyone get hurt or get injured. But, for most of us, we are willing to lay everything on the line for that ultimate goal, to get the win, to work towards that world title opportunity. So, it comes with the game. You can't have one without the other.
I completely agree. And I mean, as you can see from these comments, I mean, look, man, I've already proven, if any of you guys follow us, you can go check out those vlogs that I put together when we go out on these trips. I mean, dude, I'm with the shits. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time I got my ass kicked if I end up getting my ass kicked. So if I'm in Cali again, we'll definitely have to link up and get some work in, man, because like I said, that's what makes these things cool. Is I love hearing stories like that from you guys. Cause again, I came up through it through the amateurs. I didn't get, to the pros or anything, but it's cool to hear those kind of stories, because these are the things that you're not going to see with all these guys that are on TV. And to hear people that know you personally are not only talking about what you're doing in the ring, what you're doing as a coach and things like that. I will fully take that offer. The next time I'm in Cali, we can definitely set that up. Last time I was there,
welcome, brother.
Hey, man, let's get it, dude. Last time I was down there, my brother Miles Jury was giving me the work down there. So, I mean, any of you guys that are Bellator fans, UFC fans, you know who Miles Jury is, like I said. So, I'm not afraid of an ass whooping. Wouldn't be the first time. Probably won't be the last one. So, next time I'm in Cali, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because who knows? Maybe you'll see Mark the Shark show up on there real soon. Before we get to, I mean, this is as good as any. So, as we were paying attention to what was going on after your fight, you had a couple people, you had somebody in particular that you wanted to fight. So before I ask you about that, you've got a hell of a lot of charisma, bro. So that makes me have to beg the question, with all the charisma, were you a pro wrestling fan at all?
I did grow up watching a lot of pro wrestling as a kid.
What did I tell you?
A WCW fan, actually. And I was all about the NWO and Kevin Nash and Scott Hall and the Wolfpack. Yeah.
Man, you should have saw my shirt I was wearing with James Lynch. Hot damn. If I got it in here, here it is. Hot damn. You said NWO and the Wolfpack, huh? Tell me if you can see who that is on my shirt.
Yeah, that was my shit growing up.
Hell
as a
yeah.
kid, so
shout out to the homie at Roosevelt's. We need a sponsor for knockouts and 3 counts. You heard?
But yeah, with combat sports, one of the things that sets it apart from other sports is it's a sport, but it is entertainment too, right? In football, it doesn't matter, who's the most exciting team. It's the team that wins the playoffs is the one that's going to the Super Bowl, right? The one that wins that is the champion. Whereas in combat sports, a lot of times your ability to sell a fight and your ability to sell tickets a lot of times can fast track you to the front of the queue, so to speak. Whether people like it or not, that's the game. And so the ability to get on a mic and to entertain the crowd is just as important as anything when it comes to combat sports. So, I always say I'm a fighter first, but I'm an entertainer second. So when you see me coming in with all my leopard print swag and, doing push-ups in the ring, I do it because I want to put on a show. I'm not just here to put on a clinical performance, which I am, but I'm here to entertain the fans and make people want to watch me again, because, you know, you could put the crowd to sleep with a win and you could get the crowd on their feet in a loss. But at the end of the day, it's the crowd favorites that are going to get brought back time and again. So I'd rather put on a show just as much as anything, and I certainly look to every time that I step in the squared circle.
I mean, talk about putting on a show. You were yelling like crazy in there, man. You must have been so fucking hype, huh?
I was a little pumped up for sure. I definitely lost my voice after that when I was hooping and hollering and, you know, doing push-ups and, you know, acting like a real hood rat in there. But I was having fun, you know. So
Look, man, you were just trying to do hood rat things with your friends.
Exactly. I want to do hood rat things with my friends. So I plan to bring that same energy every time, you know, I get in there and do my thing.
All right, so that begs the question. So now you've brought up these questions. So you tell me you're a WCW fan, and you drop this guy, and you're doing push-ups after it. Did you get that from Scott Steiner? Because that was one of his trademarks, dog. Big Papa Pump hitting the push-ups in the middle of the thing. I mean, I ain't mad at you taking a page out of one of Detroit's own book, but I don't know. Now that you tell me you're a WCW fan, and hell, all that screaming awful sounded a lot like the Stinger. I don't know, bro.
So I actually, I was paying homage to the great Bernard Hopkins.
Yes, sir.
Push-ups in there as far as where I got the idea. I think it was against Jean Pascal. He was doing push-ups in between rounds against the younger, more physical Pascal in their fight, when everybody said that Hopkins was too old and shouldn't be in there with the young guns. So, you know, I always like to pay homage to the greats before me, whether it's Prince Nassim with the leopard print trunks or Jake LaMotta with the leopard print robe. Bernard
What
Hopkins.
about Emmanuel Burton with the way he used to fight so weird, dude?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
He used to fight weird as shit, and he would knock guys out, dude. That's the thing. He'd get his ass beat the whole fight, and then he would just do some weird shit and catch somebody with a shot, and it just...
Well, that's what makes combat sports fun, huh? You could lose every single round, and then you could hit, you know, a 10-run grand slam at the bottom of the ninth, so to speak, and it equalizes everything. That great equalizer, one punch. So, and especially, you know, in bare knuckle more than anything, right? It only takes that one, and I think that's what makes it such an exciting sport to be reemerging here in the States. So.
Thoughts on transitioning into 2-minute rounds? Does that make the fight more entertaining in your wheelhouse, I guess you could say?
I think it does. You know, I'm a big fan of all combat sports, but I do love women's boxing, right? And one of the reasons
they should have 3 minutes
is because of the 2-minute rounds. It forces a faster paced fight, and the fight moves along, you know, a lot more quickly. It forces more action. It's just like, you know, a sprint. The pace of it's going to be a lot faster than a marathon, right? So that shorter round kind of encourages people to go harder in between the bells because you don't have to pace yourself as much. So I like it. Like I said, it forces more action. I'm about the action. So all the rules, you know, specific to the Bkfc, whether it's towing the line, the 2-minute rounds. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the ropes and the Bkfc ring are basically steel beams.
Yeah.
There's no give to those things, so you can't lean into them. You can't.
So you can't do a rope-a-dope.
You can't rope-a-dope. You're gonna get knocked into a brick wall if you try and sit on that thing. So all these rules just force the action, and you know, I'm an action fighter, so it's all you know, to my liking for sure.
Well, that's an interesting take on the 2-minute round as far as the women go, because, you know, the one thing with that, especially after seeing somebody like Amanda Serrano fight on like the Jake Paul cards and stuff, a lot of times it seemed like with the 2-minute round, she'd just be kind of starting to get her groove, get her jab going, and then the round would be over. It's interesting to hear that you like those rounds better, because for me personally, I like watching women's boxing too, but I've always been a big advocate. I feel like they should get 3 minutes like everybody else. But somebody like Serrano, I could definitely see where it would push the pace, but I've also seen it work both sides. So it's definitely interesting to hear that you like the 2-minute rounds better. All right, go ahead, Corey.
You bring up women's boxing. Were you able to see the Michaela Meyer fight just a couple weeks ago?
I didn't see the fight. I got to go back and watch it. I am a big fan of Michaela Mayer. I have a huge crush on her. Shout out to Michaela Mayer if you're watching this. And
let him take you out for a drink right quick.
Yeah, exactly. Cheers. Thank you, my man. I appreciate you. My wingman over here.
Hey, bro. I mean, all the way from Detroit, giving you, wingmaning it from Detroit. Shit, it's cold over here. You're over there chilling.
As somebody who doesn't always make enough time to partake in watching boxing, that was a boxing card that I'm absolutely glad I tuned into. So that being said, definitely go back and watch that one. You'll be happy.
Yeah, I know it was a war of attrition and a battle of styles, right? The brawler versus the more technical boxing. So I got to go back and watch it for sure. I definitely read all about it. Like I said, I'm a big fan, so I know what happened, but I just got to go back and break down the tape a little bit.
All right. Well, since we know you're a fan, before I get into UFC 268 and all the craziness that was, like I said, the charisma of a fighter, serves you well, and you seem to know that. So I told you before we got on here, I'd give you plenty platform because, as I said, we don't censor shit over here. So as I was paying attention on his social medias, which he already threw out there for you, I saw you going back and forth with a guy that you might have next. So feel free to tell me a little bit about where that come from, why you want that fight, and how do you see it going?
Yeah, I'm looking to fight David Diaz in the BKFC January or February of 2022, the first quarter. Yeah, he was the Fight of the Night award recipient for his fight back in, must have been February of March of this year. It's been almost a year now since he got in there, but he was the Fight of the Night winner for his fight. He's a guy that came from the tryouts like me. He's 1-0 in the BKFC like me. I'm coming off that spectacular knockout victory at Fight Night 2 over in Wichita. I'm healthy and ready to go. I know he's been looking for a fight, so it seems like, an easy match to make. Two young prospects coming up, undefeated in the BKFC, both action fighters. David Diaz, let's go, Pero. Let's go.
David Diaz, again, we want the smoke. So if you got some shit to say, we got open door policy over here. So get at me, shoot me a DM, and maybe we'll bring him into the show next week. Before I get off of David Diaz, you mentioned why you think this is going to be a good matchup. What do you think makes the difference in that fight and why you get the W over David Diaz if it happens?
Well, I don't want to talk too much X's and O's. I don't like to reveal my cards that I'm holding at the poker table. So I'm not going to get too deep into why I think I'm going to win or how or anything of that nature. But you've seen his fight. You've seen my fight. You know that we go. We're going to bring it. So, it's a win-win for the fans, the organization, and everybody. It's a can't-miss fight. So that's the plan. I've said that as much on social media. We've had a little bit of back and forth. He said he's with it. So, David Diaz, if you're about it, I'm about it. Mr. David Feldman, sir, Kevin Smith, Nate Shook, send the contract. Let's go. I'll fight him here in the States, Mexico, across the pond. I'll fight him underwater. I'll fight him on the moon or anywhere in between. He can get this action. I'm about it. David Diaz, let's go. Mr. Feldman, sir, send the contract.
That's what I'm talking about. Send the contract. And all of you guys who are watching, send the motherfucking comments. Keep them coming. But yeah, dude, that's what I like to hear. Well, let me ask you this. So since you're going to be at the event, who better to ask than you? They've got quite the card lined up for BKFC this weekend. So I thought I would get your thoughts on some of these fights. So let's start ladies first. Pearl Gonzalez versus Britain Hart. How are you feeling about that fight? Do you think Pearl gets it done, or do you think Britain's experience is going to be the difference in this fight?
Oh, yeah, that's definitely one I'm excited about. Britain Hart is definitely a fan favorite, right, for most of us BKFC fans with her performance over Paige Van Zandt. So that's definitely one I'm looking forward to. Her opponent I haven't seen a whole lot of. I'll have to go out and check her out a little bit. So I really can't speak to it too much as far as who I think is gonna win, but either way, if Britain Hart's in, it should be an all-action scrap. Definitely one of the fights that I'm looking forward to watching this weekend.
So do you think she gets the finish, or do you think it's going to be a decision?
Well, with all respect to my female counterparts, the one thing that they sometimes lack over the men is punching power, right? And I think that's one of the things that actually makes the BKFC women's fights so exciting, is because they're able to hang in there and keep tagging each other and cutting each other up and busting each other up. A lot of times the women, they look a lot worse for the wear, because whereas with the men, 1 or 2 heavy shots, and that might be your night, they're able to hang in there a little bit longer. So it definitely makes it a grittier nip and tuck affair. Like I said, I haven't seen her opponent. I don't know too much about her, so I can't speak too much to it. But I'm sure, knowing Britain Hart and knowing just the standard for BKFC, it's going to be all action from start to stop. So I'm excited to see that fight.
Well, just to build I guess your anticipation, I guess you could say, since you're going to be there. Pearl Gonzalez, multiple-time MMA vet. She's been kind of all over the place. She's fought for UFC. She's looked really impressive. Most of her fighting game, though, she used her ground game. To be honest with you, that was most of her fighting game. And then what's funny, though, is she made her debut in BKFC. This is now her second fight that she's going into. And she looked amazing. She looked like she was almost untouchable. She was able to really use her range, use her jab, really straight punches, kind of like similar to what we were describing your fight as earlier. I feel like this is a real test for Britain Hart, even more so than the Paige Van Zandt fight. I feel like this is kind of like who's going to end up in the upper echelons for their women's division, especially if they end up doing this tournament that they're talking about. So with that being said, me personally, from an outsider's perspective, this is the fight that going into the card that I'm actually most anticipating, really.
I can respect that. With that being said, before I get your picks on the next fight, any thoughts on Paige Van Zandt doing her thing over in the pro wrestling world with AEW? Because we just found out a few days ago, which now is as good a time as any to tell you, you might be missing Corey on Thursday. But the reason you might be missing Corey on Thursday is we might be going a little bit earlier, because Devin might be making his return to come make some picks for AEW Full Gear this weekend, because that motherfucker, Ring the Bell, will be in Minnesota. Maybe we can see him link up with our buddy Dave LaGreca before Thunder Rosa fucking kills him. But with that being said, we've got plenty of shit to talk about with Devin, so make sure you're checking us out Thursday, and stay tuned to all those social medias in that bottom right-hand corner, and you'll see what time we're going to be live and what the hell we're going to be shooting the shit about. But back to the matter at hand. This next fight is really interesting to me, because I've seen Dat Win fight, and I've seen Palomino fight in MMA a whole ton. But It seems like, I mean, at least with the way Palomino was kind of playing things out when you watch like the lead up to the fight, it sounded like from his point of view, he made it like Win was kind of just trying to make it like he trains out of his restaurant and all those things, and he had dropped the belt, and now he's fighting for a belt again. So do you think any of that's going to cause him any problem going into this fight with such a vet like Palomino? And who do you got in this scrap?
That's one of the fights that I'm really, really excited to see. This is as big of a super fight that you'll ever see, up to this point in the BKFC. You got the former undefeated, 135-pound BKFC champion moving up 2 weight classes to take on, the rugged MMA veteran and 155-pound champion of the world. You couldn't ask for a better fight, a better matchup. You got a guy who comes from a high-level boxing background versus a guy that comes from a high-level MMA background. So you got that clash of styles as well. We'll see if the size plays a factor in this fight with that moving up 2 weight classes. But whatever happens, it's going to be a world championship affair, contested at the highest level as far as bare knuckle fighting is concerned. So that would, without a doubt, be the fight that I am second most looking forward to on the card.
So you think it's going to be Palomino, or are you taking Win?
Honestly, like I said, I don't know.
Okay.
Dat is a dog in there. He marches forward, constantly throwing, talking trash in there. Palomino, coming off his last performance, showed some real range in his boxing game against Tyler Goodjohn. I was surprised to see what a slick boxer and what a slick boxing performance he turned in. You know, my only concern for that would be the size discrepancy. We'll see if that plays a role in the fight. But honestly,
Especially because you can use the clinch.
yeah, I can't pick. I don't know. So don't ask me.
All right. Well, we got people asking questions in the comments. Who's winning? Mike Perry versus Sakio Bika. I think Mike Perry's going to do good in a bare knuckle FC fight, dude. I feel like out of everybody that could have gotten signed from UFC, I feel like Mike Perry's just fucking crazy enough to walk in there and just try to bang with motherfuckers like he did in the UFC.
Yeah,
just for
bare
reference,
knuckle.
that
Go
match
ahead.
that he's referring to is under the Triller banner. Just so you guys
Oh,
know.
shit. So he signed to Bare Knuckle FC and he's getting that Triller money. Ain't that a son of a bitch?
Get it, bro. Get it.
I ain't mad at you. Get your money, bro. Well, tell me about this main event. Who do you got? And to answer your question, Alex, I'm going Mike Perry all day, every day. I'm going Mike Perry on that one. But with the main event in this one, I'm really interested to see how this one goes. You got Hector Lombard versus Lorenzo Hunt. First of all, before I get your pick on the fight, what are your thoughts on his opponent jumping in the ring and kind of getting in his shit like that? Do you think it was over the line? Do you feel like Lombard had reason to blow his shit out like that? Or do you think, he should have kind of kept it cool?
So first things first, shout out to Lorenzo the Juggernaut Hunt. You know, he's a friend of mine. We're both Smith Brothers Combat Sports representatives.
Nice.
Shout out to Kevin Smith. But I actually met Lorenzo at the tryouts in Tampa at the beginning of the year when I flew out. He was one of the trainers that was on site holding pads and putting the guys through the workout. And I got to tell you, too, he gave a badass inspirational speech at the start of those tryouts that lit a fire under my ass. And I knew right away, this is the dude that I want to link up with. So when we had an opportunity to hit pads with some of the trainers, I just beelined it straight to Lorenzo every time. Hey, let me get a round on pads with you. Hey, let me get another round. Hey, let me get another round. And, we were only supposed to do 2 or 3. I kept sneaking back into the ring and getting extra rounds with Lorenzo to try and, make a good showing for myself and get some eyeballs on me in front of the boss man. And it definitely helped me get the contract at the open workouts. So I was real thankful to Lorenzo and all his help and advice that I was able to get from him. And I was in attendance for his fight in Birmingham, Alabama, when he was flying through the air like Superman on his way to the ring, and that spectacular knockout. I had an opportunity to hang out and get to know him a little bit afterwards as well. So he's someone I consider a friend and someone I look up to in the sport of bare knuckle as someone, to try and emulate as far as their skill set, their work ethic, their mindset, their attitude. I'm a huge fan of Lorenzo Juggernaut Hunt. With that being said, I'm a big fan of Hector Lombard too. I remember watching all his old Bellator middleweight title fights back in the day. So this fight's going to be a banger. But at the end of the day, I think Hector Lombard has had his time in the sun, so to speak. And, I think that this is going to be the passing of the torch moment, if you will. And I think it will be Lorenzo's time to shine and his crowning achievement. So I'm rocking with Smith Brothers all the way.
You heard it here first.
And
put that money down. You heard it and knew.
The world, Lorenzo, the Juggernaut Hunt.
I like it, man. Well, we're definitely going to have to clip that and see what some of our fans and listeners got to say on these BKFC fights. Well, now that I got your thoughts on those BKFC fights, before we get out of here, we talked a little bit about Chito's fight from UFC 268, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, what were your thoughts on that whole card? Because for me, Justin Gaethje versus Mike Chandler is one of the best fights I've seen in a long fucking time.
That is the best 3-round MMA fight you will ever see in your entire life. Don't at me. You know what I mean? Like, end of discussion. That is the greatest 3-round MMA fight in the history of mixed martial arts. Shout out to both of those guys, Justin Gagey and Michael Chandler. Two dudes cut from the same cloth, two wild dogs, a couple of pit bulls going at it. Spectacular show. I almost felt bad for Shane Burgos and his opponent.
Totally, bro.
Because that was a great fight. They put on a great performance, and I feel like it really got lost in the shuffle of that card because they had to follow. It's like going up after I don't know, Eddie Murphy or something on stage. It's like you're Martin Lawrence son, you're fucked. How do you follow that act? So but it really set the tone for what was probably one of the best, MMA, UFC cards that you could ever hope to see. So I
can't argue that.
Privileged to watch it and enjoy those fights live, and it's gonna be hard to top it.
Yeah.
Like J-Bone said, what a way to open the card. Tough act to follow. You ain't kidding.
Yeah, that I couldn't imagine. Like we were watching the fights as a group of friends, and I was trying to hype a couple of our friends up on the whole Billy Q Shane Burgos fight, and I'm like, man, Billy Quarantillo's that dog. He's shown himself in every fight he's been in, and a couple of them were more familiar with Shane Burgos, and I was like, man, I'm telling you, this one's going to be just like what we just seen. I was trying to hype everybody up, and they're like, that's a tough one. And yeah, they really did live up to that expectation. I know it like we had all said, it's a tough act to follow, but they did an amazing job. They really outperformed a lot of people's expectations for that fight, for sure.
Like I said, that might have been one of the best fights I've ever seen. And I'm just going to say this right now. If anybody deserves to get a title shot after all this shit plays out with Poirier and Oliveira, if Gaethje doesn't get that next title shot after that, I don't know what the UFC rankings, to quote our friend Ryan McKinnell from Busted Open and MMA Today with Misha Tate, the UFC rankings don't mean shit if Justin Gaethje doesn't get a title shot next. I'm saying that right here. Quote me. I don't give a shit. I'm just saying that's where I'm at with that one. But go ahead.
And both of those fighters didn't lose anything. I know Chandler got the loss on his record, but
again, kind of like I alluded to earlier, with combat sports, one of the things that sets it apart is you can look great in a loss and you can look horrible in a win. But the most important thing is that you put butts in the seats, you sell tickets, and you sell pay-per-views. And both of those guys did that better than anybody last Saturday. So nobody's stock went down after that one. Yeah, you can go ahead and book Justin Gaethje for the title fight because that's a lock. And Michael Chandler, he, after a performance like that, even in a loss, all he needs is one good win, and you can put him.
Who would
right
you
back
put him up against next?
I mean, there isn't a fight in the top 10 I wouldn't like to see him in. You know what I mean? I'm glad I'm not a matchmaker for UFC because it's a tough job, I'm sure. But you can't miss with a guy like Michael Chandler. Who knows? Maybe him and Tony Ferguson might make a fun comeback fight for El Kukui, but who knows? We'll see.
Yeah.
I ain't mad at that.
I would love to see that fight. I feel like that's not in the UFC's eyes, though. I feel like they're either more interested in maybe like an Islam Makhachev fight. I'm sure they want to continue to build him up, and Chandler would be a perfect. Not stepping stone, but trial would be the best way to put that. Or I could see, just because he's so high into the rankings and hasn't fought anybody maybe up to that level other than a Tony Ferguson, a Beneil Dariush. I feel like
I've heard Beneil Dariush versus Tony next. That's what I've been hearing. But what about what J-Bone's throwing out here? He says Chandler still came away with a W. And he's saying, what about him and McGregor? I don't think McGregor wants that smoke with him next, dude.
No. I was actually thinking about that during the fight. I'm like, if they ever tried to match the current state of McGregor that we're seeing against this current form of Chandler, that is not going to end well for the Irish fans of the world. It's really not, man. Chandler,
it's a tough fight for anybody at this point, especially coming off an injury and a loss and everything else. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but
no,
that'd be a fun fight too. Obviously, the Notorious is always just one. All it takes is one left hand to end anybody's night. So I wouldn't be mad at that fight either.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, I got to get your thoughts on the other two big title fights. I think Rose Namajunas might have put in one of her best performances in the UFC thus far. I mean, from the striking and the different angles that she was throwing out, clear to the timing of her takedowns was so beautiful, because that was one thing that was really talked about a lot in the pre-fight, was Weili Zhang going to be able to use the wrestling that she was learning from Henry Cejudo and really be able to change the pace of that fight? Dude, Rose is the one to me that came out with the totally different game plan, because I felt like this time she was a lot more well-balanced, a lot more well-rounded, and kind of was just taking where Weili was trying to take the fight and then just trying to be better there. Because a lot of those takedowns were just perfect timing, and Weili had no defense on the blast double. You know, you see Kathy in the comments again. We know you were rocking with Thug Rose and your Thug Rose Cup for UFC 268. She got the dub done and got her another title fight. I mean, what are your thoughts on that fight, and what do you see next for Rose?
Well, Rose is with one of the best coaches in the world, Trevor Whitman, and she's been with him for a long time. And I think you see the influence of being in that camp, in that environment. And I think, too, her confidence being the champ again this time around, I think she's really hit a new stride with her mental game more than anything. You hear her talking about all the time, I'm the best, I'm the best. And I think that she really embodies that and believes that now more than ever. And I think you see that in her performances. And I think that in combination with having a mastermind of combat sports like Trevor Whitman and being in a boiler room, which is that training center, it's hard to beat. Obviously Henry Cejudo is one of the greats of his own, but how much can you really learn in a couple months and in one camp? A lot of times it takes multiple camps and years before you really start to see, the benefits of that foundation being laid. But, obviously great fight, I wouldn't hate to see it again. But Rose being the champ and coming off a performance like that, the world is her oyster, so to speak. So, I think her options are limitless.
Yeah. I agree with that too. Do you got anybody in mind that you want to see her fight next, Corey?
Well, I feel like there's kind of two options theoretically. For Weili, I personally would love to see the Joanna fight again now that she's coming off the loss. I feel like that'd be a perfect way because, like you had noted, I don't really have an objection seeing a third fight between Weili and Rose. I feel like they put on an amazing second fight. The first fight ending the way it did with the head kick. I don't necessarily have a huge objection with it, especially with Weili being a proven top 3 of the division, that she could definitely work her way back. And I feel like a Joanna fight would be perfect for her. For the champ, Rose, I feel like you got to look towards Carla Esparza. And if for some reason
Rose even said it herself, Carla, she thinks that's the next logical fight.
Yeah, and the Cookie Monster deserves it. She's earned it at this point. She was the inaugural champ, for that women's division, and she's been on a tear as of late. So if anybody deserves it, I think that's probably the match to make.
Yeah, the only other fight I could see them possibly leaning towards, and that's just because of her level of activity, I guess, is Marina Rodriguez, or Rodriguez because Brazilian. But she's looked amazing. She's looked amazing in all her fights, and she's really worked her way into the top echelon of the division as well. So I could definitely see them wanting to give her a title fight sometime soon.
Well, that brings up just as good a point as any before we talk about the main event. I mean, you talk about Joanna Jędrzejczyk and why that Weili Zhang fight might be the fight for her to go, because I honestly don't think Joanna's saying that she doesn't want to fight unless it's for a title. I don't think she's getting back to the title unless she has at least one fight in between that. But that's a perfect point to bring up when you're talking about the main event, because even though we had another banger between Usman and Covington now is in the same position that Joanna was in that she's lost to the champ twice now. He has lost to Usman twice now. So you can't just turn around and say, well, Kobe gets a third rematch, because he lost twice. He's going to have to at least fight somebody in between. For him, I think Nate Diaz is the next move down that line, or a Masvidal fight. I think Nate Diaz or Masvidal is the way that he's going to go, one way or the other. But I mean, shout out to Colby Covington. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that fight? And with all this talk of GOAT and all these different things, where do you think Kamaru Usman stacks up now now that we come out of UFC 268.
Yeah, as far as the fight, it was an instant classic, definitely, a great follow-up to their fight previous. But unfortunately for Colby, he probably is just in an era where he would most likely be champion, if not for Usman. So I think his best hope for another title shot would be for somebody else to take the belt and kind of open up a new pathway for him towards the title. Maybe Usman retires, or if he were to lose the belt to another contender. Otherwise, he's probably going to have to win a couple fights to work his way back. But that's not for me to say. It was a great fight. I wouldn't hate seeing a third one, but they're probably going to need to let that marinate, so to speak, before they can start talking about that again. As far as Usman, his resume speaks for itself. I was a huge GSP fan growing up, and I still am a huge George St. Pierre fan, but he comes from a slightly different era. I think the game has evolved a little bit, mixed martial arts. I think the level of competition is maybe a little tougher than it was, and I think that Usman, it's a strong argument at this point as to who is the welterweight GOAT of all time. I don't want to pick one or the other, but it makes for a good conversation, and you can make a strong argument either way. But the run that he's been on and the way that he's been winning these fights, he had like 3 knockouts in a row, right?
Alex is sticking to it. Kazmat versus Kamaru in 2022. You've been saying that ever since that fight ended. I'm with it. I mean, that might be one of the best matchups that they're going to have for him at this point. Because in my opinion, as far as Kamaru goes, I really feel like you're kind of backed into a corner, right? Because in a way, it's a lot similar to what we saw with GSP. With GSP, kind of cleaning out the division. Here's the difference, though. GSP lost twice when he was in his prime. Usman is still completely undefeated. So I think that Usman is on his way to being considered for that. But I think in order for him to really be able to cement that legacy, I think he's going to have probably another 2 or 3 fights. And one of them is probably going to have to be Kazmat. Because if he comes in there and clears out, okay, so he beat Colby. Let's say he has one more fight and then, fights Kazmat next or whatever. Because I don't think it's going to be much longer before they put them in there for a title. Because the way that this guy is mauling people, I could also see that jumping him over some people too. So I think if anything, Usman might have, maybe one or 2 more, defenses. And at some point, him and Kazmat got to meet. If he doesn't lose it, him and Kazmat got to meet. But that brings up a great question to ask you since you're the boxer guy. So we heard after the fight, obviously UFC wasn't the only fights we had last weekend. What were your thoughts on Canelo's performance, and what are your thoughts on Kamaru Usman saying he wants to box Canelo Alvarez?
I'm a big fan of both guys. I would not advise anybody try and box Canelo Alvarez. That's a fool's errand and a suicide mission. The guy, you want to talk about a juggernaut, he's just out here breaking people's faces with punches. Canelo's definitely hit, a different stride and has really ascended to that pantheon of all-time greatness, in my opinion, with both the quality of his resume and then the quality of his performances that he's been putting on. It's really spectacular. I know a lot of guys want to try and get that money fight, and so they call out someone like a Canelo. But quite frankly, with all respect due to the UFC welterweight champion, I think in a traditional boxing setting, I don't think that goes 3 or 4 rounds. I think that's a very short night for Canelo. People have to understand that boxing is a different sport. It's not the same as MMA, and a lot of the techniques and styles that you're going to use in that sport are very specific to the Queensberry rules, and it's hard to come over and learn that, and it's hard to understand that if you haven't done it, and that goes for anything, whether you're coming from MMA to boxing, boxing to MMA, boxing to bare knuckle. there's always a learning curve because it's a different sport with a different rule set, and it's going to require a different skill set. And until you got in there and done it, there's really no way to simulate it. There's no way to prepare for it. So, respectfully, with all due respect for Kamaru Usman, that's not something that would even interest me, because I know better than to think that he could come over and be successful against a Canelo Alvarez. So that's my take on that.
I agree with that 100% because, you mentioned legacy and things for Canelo. I mean, Canelo is now the first Mexican to be the lineal, the undisputed champion, period. So, and that's saying a lot when you're talking about boxing and the great Mexican legacy that's there. As far as Usman goes, do you agree with what J-Bone's saying? I mean, I would say that you're probably right, dude. I mean, if he goes in there and just gets murdered by Canelo, that ain't going to look good for him, especially as champ. And I mean, I get what Usman's saying, and I think it highlights a bigger issue and that guys are trying to get paid more and why they want to take these fights like the Jake Paul fight and all those things. I think that shines a light on it, but I'm with you, J-Bone. I think if Usman were to take that fight, it would be bad news bears for him. But I mean, to go off of what you said, I feel like as far as Canelo goes in the sport of boxing, I mean, dude, the only one that really could have touched him isn't even fighting anymore. Floyd Mayweather beat him. They never got to run that back again. Outside of Floyd, I don't really see anybody else that's going to beat Canelo right now in boxing.
Well, and that was
I feel like
time,
he's the dog.
too. That was a younger Canelo, a smaller Canelo, a less experienced Canelo. This juggernaut, super middleweight, bone crusher version of Canelo would, with all due respect to Money Mayweather, would probably squash him like a bug.
But
so, and that's, a function of when they met and where they were at. I don't think in a squared circle with boxing gloves, anyone at least 168 and below does not stand a chance. And I don't care what background you come from. I don't think it tarnishes Usman's legacy because it's a different sport. I don't think it would tarnish Michael Phelps' legacy if he didn't become a gold medalist in triathlons, because it's not the same sport. You're asking them to do different things now. We got to appreciate people for their greatness, and what it is, and not get it twisted with all these crossover fan fights, and the sort.
Yeah, I think you answered that pretty perfect there, honestly, is that it wouldn't necessarily tarnish him, but it would put a bad – it'd be like grabbing a banana out of the rack of bananas and you see a little bruise on the bottom. And you'd still pick it, but it would still be a semblance in your mind when you're looking at it, I guess you could say, is that, hey, he did try to step out of the bounds of normal MMA, and it was unsuccessful. I feel like not as many people harp on McGregor, and he being more so of a striking, prominent fighter, people still don't necessarily bring the Mayweather fight up as much as they do in his current fight.
How are you going to bring it up? He went there and got paid, bro. He got paid. He got paid more money in that one fight than, even though he was getting paid more than everybody else in the UFC, he made more money in that one fight to fight 18 minutes with Floyd Mayweather than he made the whole time he was champ. And if he says he didn't, I don't give a shit what he said, because I ain't mad at you at all. Go get your money. I respect it. There ain't nothing to talk shit about, because at the end of the day, his bank account ain't hurting. But, you know, his antics might outside the cage might hurt him. But, I mean, hey, that's a story for another time.
For sure.
But, hey, man, we've kept you for a long time, dude. I don't want to hold you up.
Yeah. You know what? I'm about to run out of battery here myself. But it's been a pleasure chatting with you guys. I'd love to come back on the podcast again soon. We'll have to run it back after my next fight. We'll link up again. We'll talk about it.
Hey, I'm with it, dude. When you get any last words for your soon-to-be opponent, go ahead and throw them out. I mean, once that fight's booked, I mean, hell, we might have to bring you and Josh Burns back on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, shout out to Smith Brothers Combat Sports, David Feldman, Nate Shook. I'm coming for that fight with David Diaz, January, February. Let's go. Send the contract. I'll see you guys in Miami this weekend for the title fights, the co-headliners, the two title fights, Bkfc Miami. Check me out on Instagram, Shark Irwin Bkfc. That's Shark Irwin Bkfc on Instagram. Thank you for having me, guys. Have a great night, and I'll talk to you guys again soon.
Hell yeah. Well,
Thanks
I
for
think
coming
he
on,
buttoned
brother.
it up as good as we could have. We appreciate the time, brother man. And until next time, like I said, check us out this Thursday. I will have a time up here soon. Devin and I will be going through AEW Full Gear is this weekend as well. There's all kinds of shit going down. And GCW is here in Detroit. Uncle Chase is going down this Friday. You've got Nick fucking Gage is in the building, and we're going to see if anybody's fucking limbs get cut off. Make sure you stay tuned. Hit that subscribe button because you don't want to miss any of the action. Until next time, and in the in-between time, peace.
Thanks, guys.